Hey guys, it's Tia. I'm joined by some plants today while I film. This is my mom's monstera. This is my monstera here, my little one. And I've got my palm here as well. But that is not the point of today's video. I figured I would just spruce up my setup today. Today's video is all about the courses I've taken at UC Davis so far. What I think about them, what I think about the professor. Just kind of giving you all of the tea about my classes and courses at Davis so far. Similar to how these plants provide shade, I will also be providing shade today on some of these courses about Davis. That was really cheesy. Feel free to unsubscribe. Today's video will be a tier ranking style type of video, so each of the courses I talk about will go into a tier. Hi, this is Tia from the end of the video. I forgot to mention that there will be timestamps for all of the different classes that I talk about in my description box, so be sure to go check that out if you're looking for a specific class that I'll talk about. Before I keep going on with the video, I just want to remind you guys to continue to stay active about the Black Lives Matter protests and movement. Continue to educate yourself, do what you can, donate, protest if you can, sign petitions, share information. This is not a moment in history, this is a movement. So please stay active, stay engaged with what's going on. I will continue to leave links and resources in my description box, so feel free to check it out if you want to see how you can help. And because I'm going to be talking about courses at Davis today, I will also leave information in my description box about different courses at Davis that focus on the Black experience, African American history, systemic racism, social injustice, and many more very important topics. I found this great graphic on Instagram that compiles a whole bunch of them into one list, so be sure to check that out if you do want to educate yourself. Let's get on into my opinions about the courses I've taken so far at UC Davis. The tier rankings go as follows. The first one is Peak Academia. Doesn't really need much explaining. Peak Academia, right there in the name. The next one is She Was Cute, She Was Alright. You know, she was cute, she was alright. You know, she was cute. The next one is Fell Asleep During Lecture. Now, I want this to be more of like a vibe, like falling asleep during lecture type vibes. Because sometimes I didn't even go to lecture for some of these classes enough to fall asleep during them. So think about it as more of the essence of the class was falling asleep during lecture. The next category down is Ugly Territory. Ugly Territory as in, it wasn't cute, it was ugly and we're not loving it. We're entering ugly territory. And then the last one is Throw It Away, Burn It, which is pretty much self-explanatory. Okay, with the tier rankings out of the way, let's get into ranking my courses at Davis. So we're gonna start with my first fall quarter in 2018. I took 3 classes this quarter, and the first one I'll start talking about is Math 16A. I had it with Professor Dedell. It's the lowest level of calculus that you can take, I believe, because there's 16, 17, and 21. This is the first level of the lowest level of calculus. What do I rank this class? This class is gonna go, okay, the tier ranking is gonna be my entire experience with the class. My entire experience with the class, she was cute, she was alright, and let me tell you why. Because calculus in and of itself is throw it away, burn it, but this class was very special because I got a chance to meet people and make friends in this class, and one thing that we bonded over was how iconic our professor was. Now, he as a professor, I'm gonna be honest, I wasn't obsessed with his teaching style. The concepts themselves were very difficult for me. Calculus is not my forte, so I struggled. But he was just iconic. Like, he would walk into class with like a Puma jacket on and he was really, I don't know, he just I remember struggling a lot in the beginning of that class, but eventually doing well enough on my midterm and my final to pass. She was cute, she was alright, we made memories in that class. Would I ever take it again? Hell no. But one tip for succeeding in that class is definitely taking advantage of the resources we have on our campus for calculus tutoring. I don't know what any of this is gonna look like in an era with COVID-19, so things might be totally different, but try to figure out what those resources look like and take advantage of them. I really liked the calculus room, and I did go to office hours, but I didn't find it as helpful. All right, okay. Next on the docket, Com 53A, which was Literature of East Asia. I took this with Professor Kevin Smith. Yes, Mr. Kevin Smith, the whitest man I have ever seen, taught a class on East Asian literature. You know, choices were made, okay? I didn't make that choice. What rank would I give this? She was cute, she was alright. I'm gonna give the same ranking for this class because it was a cool class. I enjoyed the books that we read and I really liked reading more literature from East Asia. Kevin was cool. Kevin was cool. He kind of looked like Tintin from The Adventures of Tintin. I loved reading those when I was growing up, so he just kind of looked like that. But he was very sweet. He even made the final paper optional. So if we liked our grades that we got on the other papers, we didn't have to do the last one. I don't know if that was just a spur of the moment or if he does that every class. I can't really remember, but it was really nice. During finals week, I didn't have to stress as much. Okay, next we have Chem 2A, General Chemistry, and I had Professor Gulkar. Oh God. I have mad appreciation for people who do chemistry, but I just don't have enough tiny brain cells to make it through chemistry. I just can't. For me, chemistry, it was a roller coaster because I kind of didn't take it as seriously as I should have, but that whole, oh my goodness. Okay, also remember that my fall quarter was when the wildfires were going on, so there was smoke, we had to wear masks, kind of reminiscent of something that's going on now. A lot of my classes were more lenient on exams because some of our exams got canceled. In chem, my second midterm got canceled. I was freaking out because I did so poorly on that exam, but Gulakar was super, super sweet. He knew that we were going through something that was very unprecedented, so he weighted the grades so that it was a little bit easier to do well with the grades that we had from homework and from lab. And I thought he was a pretty good lecturer, to be honest. It just got to be a lot. It got to be too much. I didn't keep up with that class. If you want to do well in chem, you definitely need to make sure that you understand all the concepts as you go through and ask questions if you feel like you're getting behind, which is something that I did not do. So I have no room to blame for my failure in that class. I didn't fail, I passed. I finessed, I passed. What tier ranking would I give this? Oh my gosh. I didn't give it as much thought as I should have. If I really cared about it, it could end up in ugly territory because chem and me just don't really do well together. But I don't know, she was not cute. I will tell you that right now. I definitely did fall asleep during lecture. Yeah, I'm gonna go fell asleep during lecture. I'm sorry. Oh, I'm sorry to all the chemists out there. Gulakar was great though. If you had to take chemistry, I would recommend Gulakar. Moving on to winter quarter of 2019. This quarter I took 4 classes. The first one I'll start with is Math 16B, which is just, again, the level up from 16A. This one I had with Professor Morris, and this class, she was cute. This was a cute class, okay? Because the last experience I had with calculus, the only reason I give it the same ranking is because the professor is just iconic and the class just, it made a lot of memories for me, good and bad, but I'm not gonna say I fell asleep during lecture because he was quite entertaining. Professor Morris was also very entertaining and a very, very good lecturer. I actually did surprisingly well in this class because his tests were dumb easy. Like, if you have him for 16B, his practice exams were damn near the same as the actual exams. So if you can use those and understand those, you will be fine for the exams. He was also really funny. He would stop in the middle of lecture and just tell us like a funny story about his life and made everyone laugh and then get back to lecture. So yeah, he was a cool professor. I never dreaded going to that class. I definitely did still take studying and work to make sure I did well on exams, but I was way less stressed out for 16B than 16A for sure. All right, next is Paul 1, which is American National Government, and I took this with Professor Boudreau. If you need to take this class, take it with Professor Boudreau. This definitely gets a she was cute, she was all right type of rating because if you have Boudreau, you do not need to worry about exams because she literally gives you what you need to do well on the exams. All you gotta do is make sure you understand the study guide, and she picks off directly from the study guide, so you're good. I would literally go to office hours and just make sure everything that I wrote down for the study guide was correct, and you're good to go. The class itself is actually, I would say, mildly interesting. It is interesting to kind of understand how our government works. She even talks about campaigning. We get to watch a movie during class. So yeah, it was all right. It was okay of a class. Alrighty. Next up is GEL 10, which is Global Environmental Change. I took this with Professor Montañez. This is a very cute class. She was definitely cute. This class really focused on like the formation of Earth, the different natural forces that occur on Earth and in Earth's atmosphere. She's a great professor. Professor Montañez is really cool. I went to her office hours a lot to get help on studying for exams. She was always super sweet and always was really helpful whenever I had questions for her. So this is definitely just kind of one of those classes where you just need to make sure that you're paying attention and understanding the concepts to do well, because her exams are definitely concept driven and some of her exams were tricky. And then the last class for winter quarter of 2019 was Psych 1, General Psychology. I took this with Professor Sansusi, I think that's how you say her name, Sansusi. This is gonna be our first peak academia class. This is gonna go in peak academia because it literally changed my perspective on psych majors and psychology in general. I just didn't understand why people were psych majors. I just didn't understand why, which is so awful because I took this class and I was like, okay guys, I get it, I understand. The topics that we talked about made me think about my own life and my own experiences in a different kind of way. Like I would leave class and be like, oh, that kind of reminds me about this. If a class can make me do that and make me think outside of the classroom and really like apply the concepts I learned to like my own life or to things that I want to do, it's definitely an A+ for me. Okay, moving on to spring quarter of 2019. This quarter I took 4 classes as well. The first one I'm going to start with is Stats 13, Elementary Statistics, and I took this with Professor Albert. This class was not, I wouldn't say it's ugly territory because she definitely prepared us well for the exams and I ended up doing okay in the class, but I definitely fell asleep during lecture. I just can't care too much about statistics, so that's just on me. I didn't really find it very interesting. Also, Professor Albert particularly, she's a fine person, but the way that she would teach, I mean, she would write on the chalkboard, which is fine, I guess, but like she would write so small and so lightly that it was so difficult to see. And sometimes her mic wouldn't work properly and it was really hard to hear her. It was just, that whole class was just a big struggle bus, so that's why I'm giving it fall asleep in class, because that's the kind of vibe. You just don't want to go. You just are like, whatever, I don't really care. I need to get this over with. Okay, next, Econ 1B, which is Principles of Macroeconomics. I took this with Professor Siegler. So this was my first econ class and I didn't hate it. What would I give this? Yeah, she wasn't cute though. Like she wasn't a cute class though. She was definitely a fall asleep in lecture type, because I definitely did. He was a cool professor. I liked the way that he laid out the class. My notes from that class were always pretty neat and things made sense as we went through, but his exams were, ugh, I just didn't like them. I'm not an econ type of person, so it's gonna take a lot for me to enjoy an econ class. The thing I would say to try to do well is go to your TA's discussion sections, really try to soak up all the knowledge you can. I tried to go to other TA's discussion sections because I personally didn't really like my discussion section, and I found that that kind of helped a little bit. And like his exams are definitely more concept based. I definitely didn't study as well as I should have for the first exam and it kind of kicked my ass, so you definitely need to understand the concepts to do well. I know that sounds silly, but some of these classes you don't need to know anything to do well in these exams. Like you just need to know what the practice exams are and then you're good. So I will tell you if that's what the class was like for me. This was not one of them. All right, next we have SAS 9, which is Crisis and Environment. I took this with Professor Dahlgren. This is gonna be peak academia, yeah! It's definitely a depressing class because literally each week is just how else does climate change kill people and impact animals and destroy our land? But I absolutely love Professor Dahlgren. He no longer teaches at Davis. He had been teaching for so long, I can't remember how many years, but a lot. And his last year was when he taught this class. So we got to say goodbye to him, but he was so sweet. He really, really cared about us. I'm sure they still teach this class, just a different professor, so I can't really speak too much to, you know, tips and advice, because if it's taught by a different professor, it very well might be completely different. But it was a really cool class with really interesting topics, so some peak academia shit right there. The last class I took for spring quarter of 2019 was LDA 3, which is Sustainable Development Theory and Practice. I took this with Professor Wheeler. This, my friends, goes in peak academia. I promise I'm not handing these peak academias out. Don't worry, things are about to go downhill real fast here. But this class is definitely peak academia. This is the reason I have decided to change my major. I know I took this spring quarter last year and it's taken me a whole year to decide to change my major, but I just wasn't 100% sure. At the time I was considering minoring in something similar to my current major, so I definitely was thinking about it at the time, but wasn't really ready to make the full shift. But this class, oh my goodness, so much fun. I would say Professor Wheeler was cool, but his guest speakers that he invited were phenomenal. The one that really stuck with me was the architect from Thailand. I will leave a link to an article about the project that she focuses on. It's this phenomenal park in Bangkok that collects water and prevents flooding in the city. I was just so inspired when she came to talk. Like, It was really a wonderful class. In this class, you do have to write a 10-page paper, and that can seem kind of daunting, but you can choose the topic and you have a lot of freedom with it. For mine, I wrote about environmental inequity, talking about how all over the world, people who are disadvantaged are ravaged the most by climate change, and how development in those areas is so important. Yeah, I definitely plan on taking more environmental justice classes. I know there's some environmental justice seminars that I want to take for sure. It was nice to have freedom on this paper because I got to write about something I was really passionate about and really interested in. Even though it was 10 pages, it does fly by if you choose a topic that you really like. My TA was wonderful. She was so sweet. It was always really nice to go to her office hours and get help with my paper or to talk about the class. Yeah, this class was definitely peak academia. I have many more LDA classes to take and I'm very excited. Okay, so that wraps up my first year at Davis. Those are all of the courses that I took. Now we're moving into my second year at Davis, so we'll start with fall quarter 2019. The first class I'm going to talk about is ANS 1, which is Domestic Animals and People. I had Professor Hobie for this class, and this, my friends, is peak academia. Now, I know I said it before, I'm not handing these out. This class was genuinely peak academia. I had so much fun. I might be biased because I just love animals. I'm not an animal science major, obviously, you guys know that. But when I was still an EPAT major, you could choose to take animal science for major credit, which I don't know how that works, but I was living for it. Getting a chance to work with new animals every week was a dream. Professor Hobie was super funny. He made the class really interesting and fun. He would bring his dog Sunny to class, and the videos we'd have to watch sometimes from home to get extra knowledge about lab sometimes were filmed with his dog, and he would have like a dog and doc little series on Aggie Video. It was the sweetest thing. The labs were so much fun. We got to play with horses and goats and sheep and pigs, and yeah, do be prepared. The labs require you to really get hands-on, so you do have to, you know, take care of the horses, clean out the horses' hooves, you milk the goats, and flip sheep. That was actually the first lab that we did, was flipping sheep, which is very difficult. If you at all love animals and want to get a chance to work with animals on our campus, I would highly recommend taking this class. Moving more towards the lecture part of the class, the exams are very much based on like facts and statistics, so there's a lot of memorization. I constantly had flashcards up to my freaking forehead for that class, because sometimes the questions would be like, what's the dental formula for a pig? It's like, those are just things you have to memorize. Like, there's no like, it's not really concept driven, it's more like, do you remember this? My tip for that class too, to do well for the exams, is to really make sure that you take note on what he's saying. I would say get the lecture notes ready beforehand. He posted the lecture notes onto Canvas when I took the class, so basically all I would do is just have them ready. I would use something called DocHub. I really recommend it if you are taking a class that already posts lecture slides. You can just go on there and then type in little notes and comments and highlight stuff, so that way you don't have to like print out lecture notes, and you don't have to worry about writing everything down, because it's very important what he says. He doesn't always say everything that's on the slides. A lot of times what he says in class ends up on the exam as like a question, and it wasn't on the lecture slides. So you really do have to be engaged. You cannot fall asleep during this class, but it's very hard to do so. He keeps you on your toes. There's a lot of information, and he's a great professor. So yeah, peak academia, animal science, woo! Oh, also, I know I've got some light going on my crotch, but I'm not exactly sure. It's just the light. You can see my camera. You see it? Let's see what I can do. How does that look? That looks better. That looks good. Okay. So the next class is Biz 10, which is Everyday Biology. I had this taught by Dr. Subramarian and Nanari. What is this go? This is a fell asleep in lecture type of class. This class was just really disorganized. I felt like the lecture slides were all over the place, and just going back and looking at lecture notes was not helpful because there just was not enough context to understand what was going on unless you were there. But if you do take notes and you try your best to understand what's going on and write down key concepts, you should be fine. The exams are not crazy difficult. You just have to kind of understand those basic concepts. If you're confused with anything, I would just talk to your TA. My TA was super sweet, and we would spend time before exams going over topics and making sure that everybody understood what was going on before we took the test. I would say just make sure to go to discussion sections and write down any notes about the topics. All right, moving on, we have Communications 3V. I took this interpersonal communications class online, and it was taught by Professor Ruiz. What am I gonna rank this? You know what? She was cute and she was all right. all right is truly what she was. It was kind of an afterthought of a class, to be honest. I really didn't put a bunch of effort into taking this class. You don't really need to do a ton of work. You just have to do these challenges each week, but the exams were pretty straightforward and pretty simple. Just make sure that you're staying up to date with what's going on and watching the videos when you need to. But other than that, it really wasn't a class to freak out about. The last class I'll talk about for fall quarter 2019 was ESP1, which is environmental analysis. I took this with Professor Gwen Arnold. She's absolutely the best. If you get a chance to take a class with her, do it for sure. She's awesome. This was my first ESP class and I really liked it. I wouldn't say it was peak academia though. It didn't give me peak academia vibes. It was a good class, so she was definitely cute and she was definitely all right. It's not a difficult class, but it's a class you have to work really hard at. There's reports that you have to write. You have to do a lot of readings. The exams were definitely tricky. My first exam I did not do very well on. You really have to understand concepts because some of this stuff is complicated and takes time to really understand and memorize. But overall, it was a really good class. She's a great lecturer and a great professor. So yeah, highly recommend. All right, moving on to winter quarter of 2020. I took 4 classes this quarter. All right, so we'll start with Econ 1A, which is Principles of Microeconomics. I took this with, I cannot pronounce his name, so I'm going to just leave it here. This class, I never looked forward to this class. I would often dip out early if possible. I will put it in ugly territory. I just didn't care for this class. I don't like econ. He was all right as a professor. He wasn't awful and his exams were definitely doable, but I just didn't like going to that class. I had to go late for that class too and stay late and it just, and it just for me wasn't as interesting as Econ 1B, and Econ 1B wasn't very interesting to me. The best way to succeed in this class is to go over the practice exams, and that's kind of it. Like, if you can go over the practice exams and have a basic understanding of what's going on, you should be fine. The next class I'm going to talk about is Nut 10V, which is Discoveries and Concepts in Nutrition. I took the online version, so the lecturer for the online version was Dr. Liz Applegate. Yes, her name is Applegate, and she teaches about nutrition. We love it. We have to stand. And then if you take it in person, you'll have it with Dr. Fetter. I've heard amazing things about Dr. Fetter. In this class, I will have to say peak academia. If you go to Davis, a ton of people have taken Nut 10B and a lot of people recommend it, and I can see why for sure. I really liked learning more about nutrition. It's something that I definitely want to focus more on in my life and try to improve as much as I can. And it was just a very well done class. Online classes can be difficult sometimes because if the Canvas page isn't laid out super well and you get kind of confused about where things are, it can definitely make you not want to do anything for the class and make you definitely less motivated. But this class was laid out so well. Everything was so well organized. They always sent a morning announcement on Monday morning of the week, just giving a list of things to accomplish for the week. The videos that were filmed were super well done. She's a great lecturer, and all of the supplemental material that went with her lecture were very easy to follow. Okay, look, when women run classes, this is what it turns out to look like. Like, these women know what they're doing. These male professors need to step it up because these Canvas pages are looking ugly, guys. Like, I can't find anything. It's a big mess. The syllabus looks like it was typed on a typewriter. Like, we gotta step it up, okay? Yeah, absolutely, this was peak academia. The concepts were really cool. Like, I actually learned a ton about nutrition. They even had a whole section about being vegetarian and vegan and the best ways to get your protein and meet your caloric intake if you are vegetarian or vegan. The next class I'm going to talk about is Phi 7Y, which is Philosophies on Sexuality. This was a hybrid course, so the professor was technically Adam Sennett, but we did not see him ever in person. In hybrid courses, you don't go to lecture, you just go for discussion. So the only thing I had to physically go to campus for this class was my discussion section once a week. Where does this go? Well, it wasn't falling asleep. This one is gonna go in, she was cute, she was all right because I thought the concepts were really cool, but I had never taken a philosophies class before, and it's just not really it's not my vibe. I just didn't really get into the material as much because of the way that it was, because of the way that it was taught in a sort of philosophical, okay. It was, I don't know how to describe it. I just didn't like the way that they were analyzing things. I loved the topics. I thought the topics were really interesting to get into, you know, talking about prostitution, talking about porn, talking about just the perception of women and women's sexuality in media. super interesting topics, but I think the way that it is approached in a philosophy sense is just not as interesting to me. You have to write a paper, but it's really chill. My only note is for the paper, do start in advance so that you can email the TA in advance to look over it and give you any notes, because people waited until a little bit later after the assignment was given out to send in their papers to the TAs, and the TAs got super overwhelmed, and I don't know if they got to everybody in time. So once you get the paper, I'm so sorry. Once you get the paper materials, do start as soon as you can. That way you can get feedback as quickly as possible before everybody else tries to get feedback at the same time. The last course I took during this quarter was PLS 21, which is Computers and Technology. This was taught by, okay, it literally says on Oasis, Bailey/Frank. Now I know that the main professor's name was Frank. He was Professor Dan Frank, but I don't know who Bailey is. So I'm gonna put it in fell asleep during lecture, but Honey didn't go to lecture, so I didn't attend lecture, and you don't have to for this class. Basically, he posts all of the potential questions on Canvas in an Excel sheet, so you just need to memorize that and you're good for the exam. Some of the material also comes from the book, so you do have to take extra work as well to get questions from the book and make sure you understand those, but it's just pure memorization. The only thing is the lab, so you do have to be engaged with the lab sections. The beginning ones are pretty easy, and then they get a little bit more difficult as you start to work with RStudio and Excel. For me, it was a little bit of a struggle. If you're already an expert with Excel, it's not that bad, but I struggled because I don't usually use Excel. But that's why I don't think this class is in ugly territory, because you do gain skills in different programs. But the only thing is that lab exam was stressful as hell. You have to complete the tasks that they look for in all of the lab sections, so it takes a long time, and I just was stressed out. But if you make sure to just go over the topics and to practice with them, you should be okay. Alright, so for the latest quarter that I had, which was spring quarter of 2020, I took 3 courses, but all of these I took online because of COVID. My experience is going to definitely be slightly different than what they would have been if they were held on campus. The first course I'm going to talk about is Biz2B, an introduction to biology. This was taught by Professor Grossberg and Statuitz? Statuitz? I don't know how to pronounce it. I'm just going to say she was alright. She was alright. I didn't mind the topics that we learned about. I thought they were interesting until we got to the evolution part. I was kind of like, I don't know, I didn't really care for that part of the class. That's just me personally. I really liked learning about the ecology part. Basically, we watched lecture recordings from last year. I liked that aspect where it still felt like going to regular lecture. It wasn't like a weird Zoom format attempt. So this quarter we had 4 midterms and a final. I felt like I was taking an exam every couple of seconds. Like I'd turn around and just be like, another exam. Like it was a lot. We got to drop our lowest score, and due to everything that was happening with the Black Lives Matter movement that was going on during my finals week, all of my professors made their finals optional. I don't know if all professors did that, but that was really helpful because that was a very intense emotional week. My tip for that class would be to make sure that you are staying on top of things as you go through. Really utilize the study questions that they give out, and really helps me prepare for the exams. I went to their office hours and I found it to be very helpful in getting my questions answered. They even recorded the office hours and posted them, so if I couldn't go, I could go back and watch it through, which I really liked. So the lab section was online as well, and so they did a pretty good job adjusting. We basically just turned in Google Forms mainly. Sometimes we would have to turn in graphs, and for our first lab we had to take diversity samples. They dropped one of the lab scores as well, which was good because there was one lab where I was like, I looked at some of those questions, I said, nope. But overall, this class, it was alright. She was cute. The next course I'm going to talk about is Econ 100A, which is Intermediate Microtheory. I had this with Professor, I can't even get through it. I had this class with Professor Bushnell, and this is going to be our first throw it away, burn it tier ranking, because throw it away, burn it to the ground. Like I've said, I'm not an econ girl. I don't like econ, but this class particularly sucked ass. Part of it was doing it online for sure. I just didn't like anything about this class. The lectures would seem simple at the beginning, get super complicated at the end. The homework was totally different from our lectures, and you had to really learn a lot of new concepts to do the homework. And then the exams were horseshit. It was awful. I did not enjoy that class. Wouldn't recommend it. And the last class of this quarter was ESP 160, which is the policy process, and I took this with Professor Arnold. She was cute. She was alright. That's the tier ranking this is gonna go in because, okay, to be honest, I thought that this class was going to be about how environmental policy goes from start to finish, like the policy process, kind of the name suggests, but actually this class was way more theory-based. We learned about a different policy framework and applied different cases to them. Definitely not what I thought, and a lot of the people that took this class were poli-sci majors. But for the papers that we had to write for the class, many of the potential paper topics were environmental topics, but some of them were not environmentally based topics too. So there are no midterms or finals for the class, you just have papers to write and quizzes. I think there was 5 quizzes. There's one on each framework. You definitely need to understand the core concepts of the frameworks in order to do well on the quizzes. And you also have to do the readings for the week. The readings were pretty dense, but some of the readings were actually really interesting. But yeah, she asks pretty specific questions about the readings, so you do have to do it in order to do well on the test. The papers were okay. I mean, you got to choose your paper topic and then you applied 2 different frameworks to it. So the first paper was one framework and then the other is a different one. The papers are pretty straightforward. There's definitely a lot of work that goes into them, but they give you a pretty good idea of what they want the structure to look like. So just more about doing the research and connecting your case to your framework. That's why it's also really important to understand the framework so that you choose the best one for your case. In the papers, you also have to design your own research design. If you're interested in doing research, it's definitely cool because you get a chance to learn how to set up a research design, a potential one. But overall, that class was cute. It was all right. Okay, so that is all of the courses that I've taken at Davis so far. Thanks so much for watching, guys. If you have taken any of these classes that I've talked about, feel free to put your opinions down in the comments below. And of course, don't forget to stay engaged with the Black Lives Matter movement. Make sure to stay informed on what's going on in your area. Stay safe. We are still in a global pandemic, so wear masks if you're gonna go outside. You can kill people if you don't wear masks, so just do it. And if you don't want to wear a mask, then don't go outside. The fact that we have to say that is just, oh my god, America. Come on, girl. But anyway, thank you guys so much for watching, and I will catch you guys next time. Bye!